Welcome back to edition 2 of Little Birdie Magazine's, I guess we're looking at the drinks component, I guess we call it. This week we've got a brew, or this month I should say, this edition we've got a brew review going on. And what we're going to be looking at are a few beers from Townsville's very own Townsville Brewing Company, located in the old historic post office. It's been a landmark on the, I guess, on the social landscape for many, many years here in Townsville. Sort of iconic in its own way, and they produce some wonderful beers that have been really nicely crafted for the region, for the climate that we've got. So we thought that as we come into summer and the warmer months, well and truly honest, we'd crack a couple of their best sellers open and have a bit of a taste and a review for the second edition of the Little Birdie Mag. So the first beer that we're taking a look at is the Legends Ultra Crisp Lager, and it's a mid-strength. It's only 3.5%, so you can have a couple and still make your way home in your own motor vehicle. But yeah, lagers traditionally, they're crisp, they're fairly fresh, they're not as packed with flavour. They're sort of not necessarily crafted in a way as a lot of the ales are, your tropical ales, your pale ales, the IPAs, the sort of West Coast ales, those sorts of things. So it's a generally an easier beer to drink and enjoy and have some more. And it's that really typical German style of beer. They're great for the northern climate. They go down nice and easily. You can drink them chilled without losing too much. So let's have a look at this one.
No, I already had a taste.
Yeah, what did you think? First impressions, Josie, with that first taste?
It's nice. I mean, I know our videographer loves this beer, so being a German style. Not sure about our French counterpart here, who is not a beer drinker.
Yeah, I'm not a beer drinker, but it's fine.
It's okay, a little bit. North Queensland heat, and a beer goes down well, right?
They do.
It's the sort of beer you drink after mowing the lawns.
It does colour-wise, certainly through here. I'm not sure if it's the lighting inside, but it has a sort of a little bit of almost a rose tint throughout it, which I find quite interesting. Usually your lagers will be that really classic if you think of, something like a Great Northern or whatever it may be. They're usually that really sort of golden kind of clear colour, but it is still in a little bit cloudy as well. But I mean, you get that from being a craft beer, I guess, brewed here in town.
Yeah, it's good.
I find it does have a bit more going on. It's definitely, I mean, if you wanted to have a fairly simple to drink lager, along the lines of one of those sort of standard domestic lager beers, but something it's got a little bit more involved. This is really good. There's definitely some more flavour going on than I think you get out of the domestic beers, the mass-produced domestic beers, the big commercial ones, naturally.
No, look, I'm not a huge beer drinker, but this is actually lovely. Like, I would have one. And look, our French friend is drinking lots.
No, it's a lovely beer, and as it is that little bit lighter on alcohol content, it's sort of, looking out for your well-being and your health, which you need to do these days. It's good in that regard as well, that it's just,
It's quite funny. Jordan's from Regus service offices, and they're right next door to the brewery, which is where our offices are too. And I can now see Jordan popping down to the brewery more often.
Maybe.
For a little lager, a light lager in the afternoon.
I don't know, maybe I'll stick with wine, maybe. But I don't know, we'll see.
We've still got a few more to try.
Yeah.
A typical French reaction. But it does have, it's got the bitterness is not too heavy in it. It's sort of in the aftertaste. You can taste it around the sides of your mouth.
I think now I know you're not meant to leave beer for a long time, but I actually think the longer you leave it to get some air, it actually tastes better and has a better aroma.
Look, and beer's one of the funny things. I think we can be inclined to drink it, ice cold, right? Like that's sort of something iconic. Every beer ad you've seen since you're a child is, pulling a beer out of the ice in the esky. But, with anything that's sort of been crafted, temperature kills flavour, essentially. So any of these things, and even the same with white wine in this climate, the idea is to have something crisp and dry and ice cold and just sort of get it down. But if you can have it those few degrees warmer, not necessarily 2, 3, 4 degrees Celsius, but if you can let it get maybe 5, 6, 7.
I was just thinking, this is the summer edition.
Yeah, I know. Look,
Townsville summer. Don't leave it too long before you drink it.
No. And look, it's another reason why we don't see so. I mean, of course you can buy pints in Townsville, but for me personally, if I'm going out, I much prefer to drink schooners because beers like this, you want them to be a little warmer. You don't want them ice cold or it kills the flavour. But if you're sitting there nursing a pint for 15, 20 minutes, then it's starting to warm up and the flavour profile changes, not necessarily for the best. So that's a lovely beer to drink in sort of that stubby size in Townsville in the winter. I think in the summer.
In the summer. Well, the weather's all the same all year round almost, isn't it? It's perfect.
Our next beer, Jordan.
Yes. So the next beer is the Pacific Ale for tropical Townsville.
Can you just repeat that? I'm not sure if we understood what you said with your heavy French accent.
All right. The Pacific Ale.
I was kidding, but
Wonderful.
All right. I don't know much about it. But
No, that's okay. Look, Pacific Ales are one of my favourite varieties of beer. Like from some of the bigger manufacturers, like a Stone and Wood Pacific Ale, I think is just, if it's on tap at a pub and it's a day I've gone to Maggie Island or something like that, and I'm not at the Maggie Island Brewery, I'll go straight for something like a Stone and Wood Pacific Ale. So Pacific Ales, they're a little more complex and a bit more flavourful than a typical lager.
do you want a little bit of just trivia about Stone and Wood?
Please,
they're
throw it
actually
at me.
a B Corp company, and I'm pretty sure they still are. They were many years ago one of the first in Australia to come on board as a B Corp company.
And B Corp is the sustainability sort of program, isn't it, or
there
designation?
There are 5 or 6 pillars in it essentially, but it's a global accreditation for basically having good corporate citizenship as an organisation. So you can be small, large, but Stone and Wood were one of the first to come on board and actually lead the way in that space, which is really interesting. Not taking away from Townsville Brewery, of course.
No,
it's a local
definitely.
favourite, but just a little bit of trivia.
Yeah, that's interesting. So one thing with Pacific Ales, generally you find they're a lot cloudier. Holding that up, you'll see there's a lot more sort of sediment sits throughout it than in ales in general, rather than your lager. That comes down to the way that they ferment, with your ales being sort of top fermenting, your lagers being bottom fermenting. Lagers take a lot longer, and there's oftentimes quite a bit more in the ales visually, physically when you look through, but then also, I guess that translates to the flavour profile, and there's a lot more room to do a lot more stuff with them. But like I said, Pacific Ales are a big favourite of mine.
Tastes great.
See, and straight away, I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong with the Legends Lager. But this, to me, I could sit back and.
I'm interested to see how your palate goes with it. You're not a beer drinker, you've got a French palate.
I don't know how to describe it, if it's the right word, but it's really fresh and I don't know.
Fruity. It has got a little bit of fruit in it. Which was your favourite out of the first two?
This one.
This
I'd
one.
say this one, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Look, I feel as though and I'm not going to critique the local brewery because they can brew beer far better than I can. I feel that this is a far more typical representation of a Pacific Ale. I think their lager is a bit different to a standard lager. Like I was saying before, there's a lot more going on. Yeah. But in terms of it being what you traditionally anticipate to be a certain style of beer, I feel that their Pacific Ale is really straight down the middle of what a Pacific Ale should be. I think the lager is lovely, but I do feel it does depart a bit from what is a traditional lager in a way,
that's why I like
without
it,
it being a
actually.
criticism of course the beer. It's just not down the middle of what's traditionally anticipated to be a lager. But this is great.
Well, it's a little like the wines we tried in the last issue as well. There were some unexpected flavours that came through in those wines, which is kind of nice that we're experimenting with some people who are pushing the boundaries a little bit on flavour.
Yeah,
in
definitely.
What they're making.
The good thing about Pacific Ales that I like about Pacific Ales, and I find this when I go, to the pubs with people, and oftentimes, again, you hate to stereotype or whatnot, but if girls who are less likely to be beer drinkers, I find sometimes a Pacific Ale is a good way to get into drinking beer. They're not overly
I thought you were going to say something else.
no, they're not overly bitter. They're not overly hoppy. They're not. They're not. I don't know how you might call it, but they haven't been crafted trying to prove anything. They're really about. They're an
Easy
ale
drinking.
style of production. That whole Pacific notion. They're good in the hot weather. They're sort of coastal. They're fresh, as you were saying, Jordan. I think Pacific Ale is one of the great varieties of beer. I just love them. Maybe it's not the most exciting one in the world as a variety, but I just think it's exactly what I
It's an
want
easy
out of a
drink.
beer. Yeah.
It's a bit like those really easy Italian wines that you can buy in like litre bottles and things, on the supermarket shelf. It's that sort of beer, as you said. And as you said, an introduction to beer, a nice introduction to beer. I probably still prefer the lager at this stage, so I think I like that slightly more complex flavour in the beer, just a little bit more happening.
And I found when I was drinking the lager before, it reminded me of the wine tasting, and you were quite a fan of those wines with that younger, more acidic thing going on. And I found that a bit of the lager
I think I'm understanding your flavour profile, Josie, what you sort of tend to like. I'm narrowing down.
I'm open to bribery, people.
But no, I find that interesting because you did enjoy those characteristics that I found that it's that younger, fresher taste, there's a little bit of that acidity in those wines, and then I found that in the lager as well.
And I guess that's the thing with the review and why we try and actually bring a few of us into it. Everybody does have a different flavour profile, and I've often found it interesting if I do a taste menu or a degustation meal somewhere sometimes, and some of the flavourings of wines to food, and the same as beer to food. Some acclaimed wines don't do it for some people, and vice versa. Some everyday drinking beers, wines are what, you know, a lot of people prefer. And I guess the trick really is getting your palate used to different flavours, and I think that's the biggest thing. If you keep drinking the same thing over and over again, you think anything different to that isn't good. But if you allow yourself to keep trying things, and it's great that we have a few breweries here now, right, who actually are you know, pushing the boundaries a little bit on some of the flavours they're bringing out. So,
No, absolutely.
and you're the first one to finish.
I do like this one. The Pacific Ale is quite nice. But you do make an interesting point there, and you know, when they talk about wines that win lots of awards and likewise beers and spirits and things, it's not even down to taste. You know, the best booze is whatever it be, spirits, wines, beer, whatever. The best one is the one that you enjoy, and the best way to have it is to have it the way you enjoy it. There's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of wankery or jiggery pokery around alcohol and how you should or shouldn't drink it, and lots of rules and things like that. But at the end of the day, and I say this as a guy who owns a bar and sees people drinking every single day, the best way to enjoy whatever tipple you like is actually just to have it the way you like it. And when you look at, you know, an award-winning wine, it wins an award because it fills a criteria. It's not because it actually tastes better or worse.
No,
and that's that important thing, you know.
For people to realise, and often some of those wines can be extremely complex, and actually quite really difficult for a palate that's not used to that complexity.
Yeah,
if that makes sense. So
yeah.
you can taste it and you go, this is awful.
Yeah,
You know? But that said, I do have a few favourites from different parts of Australia that are just, I consider them the most amazing wines ever. They're still, you know, up there in price, not the most expensive, but, you know, close to, you know. But then you can pick up a $10 bottle of wine these days that's brilliant.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. Shall we move on to the final beer?
So we're about to try the Tropical Coast Pale Ale. I haven't tried this, but I have a feeling I know what it's going to taste like.
What do you think that feeling is?
Mentioning a commercial brand, but one of those fat yak sort of tropical flavoured beers is what I think it might be similar to.
Yep.
It's been a while since I've had one of those too, so crack it open, Richard, and we'll see how we go.
Let's see how we go. So tropical ales, again, like the Pacific Ale, I guess we just go one step further, where we went from the lagers, which are generally fairly crisp, fresh. You know, you can have them really chilled. You're not losing so much flavour because generally they're not packed, loaded with flavour in the same way that ales are. Pacific Ale, I find, is just that easy. Get into it, you can enjoy it straight off. Tropical ales, it's a fairly new breed of beer, to be honest. But really the idea is what we're talking about here is, again, suited to warmer climates. Shouldn't be anything that's sort of like really chowing down on a meal, you know. And usually you'd expect to get sort of some floralness coming through in the way that they've done their steeping, the way they've managed their grains and the hops and things like that. That sort of floral, tropical kind of feel.
Do you think they introduced them to make beers more appealing to women rather than that very bitter kind of approach? Not sure, just putting it out there. I mean, that's what I always thought, that you know, they, what was it, about 10, 15 years ago, they started to really change the profile of beers? Like
I think a lot of it comes from, I think there will have been several things that contribute to that, because it's an interesting point that you make, but a lot of it's about the availability of economic production, you know, and a lot of it is sort of, you know, we got into that stage here, certainly in Australia, 10 to 15 years ago. And I guess as, you know, we follow the USA and they started sort of back in the 90s, but moving away from those traditional big mass-produced domestic beers and imported beers, and
kind of, you know, people realising that it was A, feasible, and B, yeah, you hit that sophistication level where people want a little bit more. And you realise that, like, just like with wine, with beer, there's actually so much you can do. There's the grains that you use, how you treat them, what you do with the yeasts that you use, the hops that you use, how you let them interact, how you age them, all those sorts of things can play such a big part. I mean, like, you know, beer is not just beer. You know, there's it's a inordinately big spectrum. So I just think it's one of those things where, yeah, probably women moving into the space, but then also just I think even, you know, men, like, you know, the craft beer movement is huge, and
It's
the rise of
huge,
home
isn't
brewing
it?
and
Yeah.
the availability and affordability of really sort of, you know, you can brew professional quality beer at home these days with equipment you can buy that doesn't cost that much. And so I think it just kind of opens doors up, and then people experiment and it grows and becomes a craft more than just a thing that you drink,
Yeah.
as per the name, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. It's got a really strong aroma.
But it does. I mean, it's got that floralness, fruity, floral sort of.
I
going on.
I keep waiting for Jordan's reaction.
And you can taste that already. There's a lot more there happening. It's like multi-flavour almost.
Actually, that's a little surprising. It's
Than
not
the
as
Pacific
fruity
Ale.
as I thought
Yeah,
it would be.
yeah. So like I said, that Pacific Ale, always a very easy one to get into. It's got a bit of everything a beer should have, but they're a little nondescript is a terrible way of saying it, but you know, they're not offensive in any way to anyone. This has more going on than that
It
Pacific Ale,
certainly does.
as you'd expect. Definitely a little more bitterness. It's only, I think, on the label here, it says it's 33 IBUs, the International Bitterness Units. That's at the lower end of that scale, but that scale is relative to the other flavours. You know, it's more of a guideline, like it's sort of it's not a finite thing that stands on its own. So even though it is lower bitterness on there, I find this is more bitter than the Pacific Ale. But yeah, there's some darker tones in here.
There
I think.
really
It's
are. It's
like that malty, bit of chocolatey or something like that. I mean,
well, it's almost got that. The end of the palate is a little bit like a Guinness.
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Funnily enough, that surprises me.
Those darker
I've
things
actually
going
never
on.
tried. Yeah, I've never tried this before at the brewery.
Yep. Again, I think that's an excellent beer. I think it's a really good interpretation of a.
It's interesting because it's a tropical ale, but it doesn't have that. It's more chocolatey and
Toward the end there, yeah, at the
it's got
second
that-
half of it, yeah.
that sort of length in the palate. That's, you know, unlike the pale ale that just sort of sits really crisp and, you know,
The Pacific Ale, yeah.
Pacific ale.
yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
But that's, I mean, this is the thing, that this is a pale ale, the tropical one. It's a tropical pale ale.
And pale ales are, I guess that's that whole different family to the Pacific Ale, you know. So it's, yeah, it's. I quite like it. You wouldn't drink it, certainly to my mind. I wouldn't drink as many of these as I would the Pacific Ale, just because that flavour's a lot stronger. But
Well, I can actually imagine drinking this with a meal, to be honest. Like Christmas lunch, you know, it's coming
yeah,
up.
yeah,
This would actually be okay with sort of, sitting outside, your turkey, your salads, your prawns,
Yep.
your mangoes. A few bottles of this on the table with some glasses,
yeah, yeah.
just as an option. It's actually quite nice. Yeah.
I obviously didn't
Really
like
nice.
that one either. So
And we know Josie's a close second, or slower second. Jordan's coming third.
Yeah.
But yeah, actually I really like that. But I like that with food. I think that's one I would like to drink with food, if that makes sense. The others I think are good to just have, have a few drinks. But this one I actually think you can pair with your Christmas lunch.
I like the Pacific Ale. The lager, I feel like it sort of is a little bit off the track of what I associate with the lager. Like I said, there's a bit of acidity and whatnot going on there.
And there's nothing wrong at all with the Tropical Coast Pale Ale. I just, in terms of beers, my go-to is something, like I said, like a Pacific Ale. I'm not
Yeah.
looking to go on a journey when I'm drinking beer.
Yeah,
I'm
not a
looking to
big
sit
beer
back with
drinker,
some
so-
mates and
Yeah.
really just enjoy having a beer. I don't need it to be telling me a whole story. Wines, I love big punchy wines,
Yeah.
heaps going on, telling a story. When it's beer drinking weather, I'm like, that's all I really, I just want to sit back with that I don't generally.
Fishing rod.
Yeah, no, that's right. Like I
Beer.
don't sort of, you know, beer.
Cricket on.
Like beer is the meal for me. I don't generally eat beer with the meal. Eat beer and drink beer with the meal. So I just love the idea of that. To me, I'd think of that Pacific Ale. I think of sitting on a beach with an esky and some good mates. Fishing rods there, but no one actually using them. You know, like that's that classic. That's that Pacific Ale for me. That's the one that I quite like. So that's the brew review for Little Birdie magazine for the second edition. It's look, Townsville Brewing Company. They've got some great beers, and it's fantastic now. You can get them available in the takeaway formats really easy. Dan Murphy's, I think I've seen them down in there. Yeah. Local bottle shops
from the brewery as
stock
well,
them, and
so
from the brewery itself, you can drop in and you can sample some off the tap, and then
and
get some takeaways.
they are always happy for you to come and sample too. So that's always one great there.
Yeah, but that lager I think is something a little different, a little bit of a departure from your standard. Nothing wrong with it. I think the Pacific Ale, like I've said, is a great example of a Pacific Ale, and if that's what you like, then that's you know, go safely, go hard, buy a carton. And the floral, the Tropical Coast Pale Ale is a great beer too. I've got nothing against it. It's just my personal tendencies head toward that Pacific Ale style. But if you enjoy something a little bit maltier, a little bit hangs around on the palate a little bit longer, I think that Tropical Ale is an excellent beer for people who enjoy that kind of thing. So thanks for having a look with us, and I think we might be about to make some Christmas cocktails as well. Is that right?
Yes, the new segment for Christmas.
Yes.
We're about to do some Christmas cocktails, so hang with us, people.
Lovely.